That's true. We spent trillions in Iraq, trillions in Afghanistan. We got nothing. Before we nation build the rest of the world, we should be building safe schools for our own children in our own nation, right? Last year alone, Biden and congressional Democrats sent $122 billion in so-called COVID relief funds to K through 12 schools, even while they were keeping many of our schools totally shut down, no doubt severely worsening the mental health challenge of many youth. I mean, many of these young people really suffered very greatly. They became very ill. They may have been ill to start, but they became very, very ill. Congress should vote immediately to take back every penny of unused COVID relief money, take it back from the states, and use that money to quickly establish impenetrable security at every school all across our land. As many have noted, inner city schools rarely have these kinds of mass shootings. I didn't know that until just recently. Think of that. They rarely have this problem, despite being located in very tough neighborhoods, in many cases where there's tremendous levels of high crime and violence. They're much more dangerous outside the school than inside. The reason is that for decades, inner city schools have had much stronger security measures in place in the school itself, including metal detectors and, yes, armed guards. They had guns, armed guards. Whatever our differences may be on other issues, what on earth is stopping Democrats from immediately passing measures to ramp up school security? How many more tragedies will it take until they agree to set aside their far-left political agenda and do what is really needed and what actually works? This is not about virtue cycling and signing. This is about blaming your enemies. No, we don't want to do that. This is about saving our children's lives. Yes, that's what we want to do. Surely we can all agree our schools should not be the softest target. Our schools should be the single hardest target in our country. And that's why, as part of a comprehensive school safety plan, it's time to finally allow highly trained teachers to safely and discreetly concealed carry. Let them concealed carry. And again, they have to be able to handle it. They have to be highly trained, all of those things, but let them do that. It would be so much better and so much more effective, even from a cost standpoint. Because there is no sign more inviting to a mass killer than a sign that declares a gun-free zone. Most dangerous place. I know it sounds good, and it really does. Doesn't it sound wonderful? But it's not. And statistically, it's a total disaster. Gun-free zone, they look at that sign and they say, that's where I'm going. We cannot have that, because if somebody goes into that building, all of those innocent people will be taken out, will be killed, will be tortured. Bad things will happen. Have to get rid of it. As the age-old saying goes, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. Have you ever heard that? No, you've never heard that. And in the absence of a member of law enforcement, there is no one you would rather have nearby when a crisis strikes than an armed, expertly trained member of the NRA. Yeah. Let's not pretend that those on the left are just talking about limiting one class of gun or one category of ammunition. You know they're not doing that. We all know they want total gun confiscation. Know that. This would be a first step. Once they get the first step, they'll take the second step, the third, the fourth, and then you'll have a whole different look at the Second Amendment which is, by the way, totally under siege. But we stopped it for 4 years. We stopped it. And you've got to stop it. You've got to stop it. But even if every decent and honest American gave up their guns, the criminals would never give up theirs, and they never will. They're never going to give up theirs. They would wreak havoc like never before in our country. The fact is, there will always be sick and demonic souls who wish to harm the innocent and see malice triumph over good. Going to have that. But the existence of evil in our world is not a reason to disarm law-abiding citizens who know how to use their weapon and can protect a lot of people. The existence of evil is one of the very best reasons to arm law-abiding citizens. And that is why one of the core missions of the NRA is to train, prepare, and equip responsible American men and women with the knowledge and tools they need to defend themselves, their families, and their communities. Have to defend their communities and their families. Every single year, the NRA's 125,000 certified instructors, these are highly trained, very, very capable people. They train an incredible 1 million Americans to be safer gun owners, ready to act when the situation calls. An incredible job. And every day that training is protecting the vulnerable and safeguarding the innocent. An estimated 500,000 to 2.5 million Americans each year use a firearm in self-defense, the vast majority without ever even having to fire a shot. Oftentimes they know you have it and they say, no, thank you. We're not gonna mess with her. In addition, according to newly released data from the FBI, last year there were not one, not two, not three, but 4 active shooters who were taken out by an armed civilian bravely exercising their Second Amendment rights, saving countless innocent lives. That is what the Second Amendment is all about. We're honored to be joined today by a true Texas hero. The Sunday after Christmas in 2019, veteran firearms instructor Jack Wilson was attending services at the West Freeway Church of Christ outside of Fort Worth. He saw a strange man enter the church, and after that, Jack never took his eyes off him, would not leave him. He knew something was wrong, right up until the man approached the person serving communion and pulled out a gun. Thankfully, after Texas passed a law allowing concealed carry in places of worship, Jack had volunteered to lead his church's citizens security team, and he knew what he was doing. Instantly, Jack and another congregant pulled out their firearms very quickly, very professionally. The shooter gunned down Jack's team member and then turned and killed the man serving Holy Communion. Amid the chaos, Jack had only an instant to take aim. He saw his chance and took out the shooter with a single perfect shot. Incredible. Come on up here, Jack. Come on up here, Jack. Stay right here. Stay right there, Jack. Thanks to Jack's sharp eye and swift action, the shooter was down within 6 seconds out from pulling his gun. Think of that, 6 seconds. And with more than 240 worshipers in the church, which perhaps all would be gone right now, Jack had saved the lives of an untold number of innocent people that he knew very well and he loved. Jack, we want to thank you for a job well done. We salute you, a true professional, a really great man. Jack, say a few words, Jack.
Thank each and every one of you. Again, thank you, President Trump, and you're still my president. What I did that day was not for my glory. It was to save countless friends and family in that setting. I hope you're never put in that position, but understand if you are put in that position, you have to make that decision to do what is right. Not what somebody says, well, you shouldn't do that. No. I did not kill a human being that day. I took out evil. And just as what happened in Uvalde this week, that was evil. We have to deal with evil at all levels. You have to stand up and be prepared to protect and do what you have to do to stop evil in this country. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Thank you very much, Jack. And as Jack's story reminds us, defending our Second Amendment is about defending law, order, and life. We know that. As law and order conservatives, we have no higher goal than to reduce violent crime by the greatest degree possible. And there is no mystery as to what is required. Over the past 2 years, our nation has paid a horrifically bloody price for the Democrats' defund the police rhetoric and their weak on crime policies. We have paid a big price. In every city where the left attacked the police, slashing funding, or hired radical prosecutors, violent crime has skyrocketed. Last year, 12 major cities hit all-time highs. This is the history of our country, all-time highs in record homicides. And this year is looking far, far worse, not even close. In Democrat-run Sacramento last year, a man with a long criminal history was released from jail on zero bail and wished that he would never have been put in jail. That was his wish. Weeks later, he broke into an innocent woman's home, sexually assaulted her, murdered her, killed her 2 dogs, and set her house on fire. This past February in New York, another horrible person with at least 6 prior arrests was released without bail before going on a stalking tour after a 35-year-old woman went into her apartment, stabbing her to death and leaving her body in the bathtub. And recently in Philadelphia, a thug murdered an innocent man walking his dog 2 weeks after being released on armed kidnapping and assault charges where he badly hurt a number of people. The very same Democrat politicians who stoked riots over a single police-involved killing 2 years ago are numb to the mounting death toll of their own radical policies. But we must not be. We cannot let that happen. Big city mayors like Lori Lightfoot in Chicago, Muriel Bowser in Washington, Jim Kenney in Philadelphia watch the slaughter day in and day out and do absolutely nothing. But we must act. If America had a proper approach to policing, prosecuting, and jailing, we could cut violent crime in our major cities by much more than half, and it would take place almost immediately. Under the greatest mayor in the history of New York, Rudy Giuliani, they cut violent crime by 58% and the murder rate by 66% in just a few years. And then it got better than that. And under our own administration, we significantly reduced violent crime 3 years in a row. We resurrected Project Safe Neighborhoods, bringing together prosecutors, police, sheriffs, and citizen groups to get dangerous felons off the streets and off the streets rapidly. We funded 200 new violent crime prosecutors with Operation Legend. we surged hundreds and hundreds of federal law enforcement officers to Democrat-run cities that you've heard so many horrible things about, to put violent offenders behind bars where they belong. When they started knocking down statues in Washington, D.C. and other locations, I watched this in amazement. Lincoln, Jefferson, Washington, knocking them down. And I immediately signed an executive order which stated that anybody even lightly defaces a federal monument or statue will get a minimum of 10 years in prison, 10 years. And immediately upon signing it, everything stopped. Do you ever notice that? It all stopped. There was nothing. Didn't happen. Amazing, isn't it? I felt I had a political and moral obligation to allow Democrat mayors and governors to run their cities and states when it came to crime and riots and even horrible violence. In my own mind, I was allowing the Democrats to show how they would handle the situation. And when it got out of control, I got involved. I got our government energized. I called the National Guard and federal law enforcement, and we saved the cities of Minneapolis, Kenosha, Seattle, Chicago, and even Portland during some very, very bad times in those places. But then they wander back to the past. But if I ever do it again, namely run for president and win, I would no longer feel obligated to do it that way. I would crack down on violent crime like never before. Which is the way I would have liked to have done it the first time, but in a certain way, I'm glad I didn't. The easiest, simplest, most straightforward thing we can do to save thousands of American lives from violence is to hire more police, arrest more violent criminals, give them speedy trials, and get them into jail. And we've now seen what the Democrats do when they're left to run the cities. So now it has to be done right. Over time, that will save tens of thousands of lives and billions of dollars. Never forget the same people that are lecturing us about gun confiscation are the ones who are also taking cops off the street and letting criminals out of jail, knowing that it will get tens of thousands of Americans killed, and killed rather quickly, unfortunately. You really wonder, do the Democrats even care? Now, the radical left Democrats are continuing to push to abolish cash bail and to strip our police officers of their qualified immunity. Just this week, the Biden administration announced new policies threatening to hold law enforcement officers liable not only for their misconduct, but even for the misconduct of other officers, a totally destructive policy that will only make our communities less safe. What officer is going to get involved if they think they can lose everything, their family, their pension, everything? It's crazy what's going on, not even thinkable. If Democrats truly care about stopping the bloodshed in America, the Biden administration's war on police must end, and it must end right now. We will no longer defund. Thank you. We will no longer. I knew it had to happen. Who is that man? Stand up, please. Who is that? Had to happen. We will no longer defund the police, and we will no longer even mention defunding of the police. We will never mention it again. Great American heroes. And if allowed to do their job, they will do it like nobody else can. All of those crime statistics will be cut so in such a big way. You'll be so proud. You'll be so proud to be an American when you see in Chicago When you see in Chicago 80 people shot, sometimes in a weekend, and many people dying, that's a war zone. When you see what's happening in other cities, it's just incredible. So you'll be proud to be an American. Under a new Congress next year, we should pass legislation strengthening qualified immunity for our police officers. We have to do that. Who would ever take a job without that? Think of it. Who would ever take a job? You ruin your life, have one bad story that may be made up because a lot of the stories.
Okay, welcome. We're here. I want to go quickly. I got Boris Epshteyn, President Trump speaking at NRA. I want to bring in Andrew Giuliani. Andrew, what I'm stunned is literally that's your platform. I don't understand how the Republican Party in New York does not want Donald Trump. Donald Trump is saying they're laying out a detailed law and order platform. And I'm sitting there taking notes. I said, this is what Andrew Giuliani has said on War Room every time he comes on. Andrew Giuliani.
Steve, there's so many things that he talked about there. And in those 20 minutes we were listening, I mean, first off, talking about how you don't see these school shootings at some of the most dangerous areas in our cities. And why is that? Because you have a law enforcement presence in there. That's the thing that's so important. I love the idea of an air marshals program in our schools. That way, if there is an active shooter, you don't know actually which classroom has defense right there in terms of that. But also when we look at the cities, when we continue to hear defunding the police and what that actually means and what that does, it's no wonder why we've seen crime spiral out of control. And this isn't just a problem in New York City, Steve, or even in New York State. This is all around the country because you have crazy ideas like defunding our police. He mentioned qualified immunity. One of those communists, I can't remember if it was Ben or Jerry, but one of those ice cream guys was up in the New York State legislature last week with a shirt that said end QI, end qualified immunity. You know what that's going to do? You're going to have nobody with any talent that's going to apply for law enforcement anymore. And then you're just going to continue to see crime spiral out of control because you're going to put law enforcement more and more on their heels. The thing is, and he referenced this too, Steve, there is a playbook that works. We saw it in New York in the 90s. We can do it again. All it takes is some guts and making sure that we tell these state legislatures that, hey, this is what we need to do. You need to utilize your leverage in order to get this done. And that's what I will do starting on day one of my administration.
Here's what's so amazing about it. I mean, the speech, you've come on here half a dozen times, and President Trump, I guess the speechwriter scripted a little bit of his speech. You said, I'm going to get rid of cash bail immediately, right? I'm going to stop the defund the police. I'm going to fire the district attorney immediately. First thing I'm going to do. He goes around and calls that New York City by name and then mentions the hallowed name of your father, Rudy Giuliani, as a law and order. Remember, I lived in New York City. I was working at Goldman Sachs. The city was, in fact, I was living in Brooklyn Heights, took that subway that the guy at Goldman Sachs got gunned down in cold blood on Sunday morning going to brunch. I took that all the time to go over to 85 Broad. Your playbook was exactly what Trump's saying has to happen to get these cities under control. Are you committed to that program, Andrew Giuliani, as the next governor in New York?
I'm 100% committed. But here's the thing, Steve, and you highlighted this. This is not just in theory. This is worked in practice, right? You could say in the early 90s when this was first implemented in New York City by Rudy Giuliani, it was a theory by James Q. Wilson called broken windows. So it was a new thing that was tried. But we've seen this actually work in New York City. We've seen this actually work for short periods of time when they implemented it in Los Angeles for 4 or 5 years before the radical left ended up coming in and pushing the defund the police movement. We actually have seen it work in other areas in the United States and around the world. Just ask one of your regulars, Bernie Kerik, about this. This works. So why are we doing the opposite approach? And guess what? We're doing the opposite approach and getting the opposite of results. On day one, we bring back broken windows into the state of New York, and we make sure that we stop, question, and frisk the bad guys in New York. Because the truth is, until we let our cops be proactive again, we're going to continue to see crime go the wrong direction and more New Yorkers leave for safer places.
Qualified immunity and cash bail, no cash bail. Walk us through. What are you going to do on that on day one?
So cashless bail, and this is something that I think goes hand in hand with firing the DAs like Alvin Bragg or those Soros-funded ones that don't actually want to prosecute and are basically violating their oath of office. So cashless bail, basically 3 years ago in New York, Andrew Cuomo signed into law that a lot of these offenses, low-level offenses, would not actually get prosecuted. And so I've heard story after story from the NYPD, from Rochester Police, where you have people that literally are arrested 4, 5, 10, 15 times. The president highlighted somebody who was arrested 6 times before they went on a murder rampage. The killer this last weekend in New York City on the subway in Manhattan, in a good area of Manhattan, was arrested, Steve, 19 times. This guy should not have seen the light of day, period. So all that ends on day one, and I sit down with the state legislature and state assembly and say very simply, Steve, you're repealing this, and until this is fully repealed, I'm not funding your top priorities, period. It's that simple.
You're prepared to go in and have a budget fight day one and say, hey, we're not going to appropriate anything. I'm not signing anything until we get our hands around the anarchy, the chaos, and the crime in New York City and the rest of the state. 100%.
Not only that, I'm ready to go use my bully pulpit. I'm really going to give the Assembly and the State Senate a week and sit down and say, hey, look, you don't come to me with a plan in 1 week. We're going to go into every single one of your districts, and I'm going to use the governor's bully pulpit and basically explain why you are making your neighborhood more dangerous. I think in so many of these neighborhoods, they have not actually truly had a conversation about this where they understand. They've just honestly said, okay, I'm voting Democrat. We need to make sure we use the bully pulpit to make New York safer, and we'll do it.
Andrew, please hang through the commercial break. Short commercial break. Andrew Giuliani running for governor of New York. We also have a gentleman who's running for the governor of Illinois. We're on fire. Boris Epshteyn's with me. Joanna Miller's going to join us. All next in the War Room Battleground.
War Room Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, President Trump is continuing to speak down at Houston, the NRA. We're going to dip back in there in a couple of minutes, but I want to get back to Andrew Giuliani. Look, Andrew, here's what I don't understand. President Trump, he's either been writing your rap, or you wrote that speech. And I know you worked in the White House. You worked on a lot of speeches. You were one of the mainstays, one of the few people there for all 4 years. But here's what I don't get, Andrew, and this I'm serious. I don't understand when you hear a guy like that who's been president, who should be president now because the thing was stolen, as you heard the NRA people say, he's our president, when he lays out a common sense, fair, equitable law and order program that principally protects minorities in these inner cities that are being preyed on by these criminals, the criminal class, and he lays it out in that common sense. Please tell me how the GOP in New York State does not want to embrace Donald J. Trump, the 45th president of the United States. Andrew, I don't get it. I don't understand it.
It's old establishment thinking, Steve, and we've seen that it's failed. It's failed Americans time and time again, unfortunately. And even if for some reason in some places they do win a few races, they continue to let down the Americans that actually are their constituents when they get into government. And to me, in terms of what he says right there, look, I've learned from a guy named Trump and I've learned from another guy named Giuliani on this stuff. And the truth is this stuff works. When we're talking about cleaning up our cities, when we're talking about cleaning up our state, the truth is you want to make sure your cops are proactive. You want to protect their qualified immunity. You want to make sure you bring broken windows theory, and you want to stop, question, and frisk. And if you do that, Steve, there's no way the crime does not go down. It's just impossible. And now we're seeing the exact opposite. We're getting the opposite results. But Trump is absolutely right on this. And by the way, I know that they said, let's go Brandon before, but maybe we got to start making shirts. Jack is right, because he is our president. And we do know what happened on November 3rd, 2020. That cannot happen on November 8th, 2022. And that's why I'm so glad you have Joanna coming up, because she has absolutely nailed so much of this in terms of what happened in the Steele on November 3rd, 2020.
Oh no, she's amazing. If we can't get to her tonight, we're going to have her. She's got a huge article in Real Clear Markets. John Tamney over there. It's just amazing on the formula. I can tell you something, Andrew. The audience response to you gets more powerful with every. So we really want you on here a lot. 'Cause here's the reason: even all of forget the big audience we have in New York and upstate New York. Everybody in the country feels some ownership for New York City. Your father, that's why your father is called America's mayor, right? He's America's mayor because people have a deep love for New York City, and they understand New York City is the greatest city we have. And people sit there and just go, they think it's descending into anarchy and chaos. And that's not good for anybody. It's not good for the financial industry. It's not good for media. It's not good for all these companies. And it's terrible for America, where our flagship city is descending into chaos and anarchy. And that's why I think you're offering people an alternative path, a path that's fair, even-handed, has discernment. And here's the beauty of it. It's been done before. This is not some theoretical thing coming out of some faculty lounge at some university. Andrew, how do people find out more about you, and how do they find out more about your campaign?
Go to saveny.org. That's saveny.org. And honestly, Steve, you're absolutely right. This has been done before. We can do this again. And when I think about New York, I think about connecting the rest of the world to the United States of America through New York, the Erie Canal, the Dutch West Indies Company at the southern tip of Manhattan. And one final thing this weekend in particular, I want to thank all those who made the ultimate sacrifice so that way we can have our freedoms. That way we have our First and our Second Amendment. And to all those Gold Star families, God bless you and thank you for the sacrifice that you and your family have made.
Andrew Giuliani, honored to have you on here. Fight on, sir.
Thank you, Steve.
I want to bring in Boris Epshteyn first. We're going to go to Illinois and talk to a gentleman running for the governor. Man, talk about two states that need a turnaround. Illinois with the great city of Chicago, and New York with New York City. Boris, I want to go back to the president's speech. For those that missed it on Frank's speech and Linda, we started in the previous hour. The opening of that speech was one of the most dramatic and powerful things I've ever heard. President Trump reading the list of names with the bells playing in the background, incredibly moving. And I got to tell you, some people didn't show up to this thing in Houston. President Trump, you're not going to back off President Trump. He's got some core values that he's an immovable object on, Boris.
That's right, Steve. And, the president read the names of the victims. The bell tolled, and it was an unbelievably powerful moment as we bring to end a very difficult week. And President Trump said some things that are very, very poignant and specific about the need to protect our children, about sending $40 billion to Ukraine instead of using it on protecting our schools and our children. And you're right, President Trump didn't back off and didn't back down from his commitment. Governor Abbott of Texas is not there; it's his state. Ron DeSantis of Florida didn't end up coming to address the event. But President Trump came, and not only honored the victims, but also spoke about solutions. Spoke about solutions on school safety. Spoke about solutions on safety across the country, and on bringing rampant crime down across the country. And very strongly alluded there to his next moves and his future moves, as he goes from being the 45th and, as we believe, the 46th to being the 47th president of the United States of America. And you better believe
he is he is the 46th. Yep. Right.
He's the 45th, 46th, and future is the 47th. And if you look at where this country is without him, and he put out actually a statement on Truth this morning. Look at the comparison where we were 2 years ago versus we are now. I mean, it is an absolute disaster. And you saw tonight again. You saw again tonight, not just Steve, leadership and strength, but you saw a lot of compassion and empathy from President Trump, and that's the man that you and I are honored to know. Andrew Giuliani's honored to know, and I'm very, very thankful for his speech tonight. Honored to know.
Let me go out to Illinois. I want to go to. I want to go out to Darren Bailey in Illinois. Darren, we got Andrew Giuliani's fighting the good fight in New York State. We got Doug Mastriano's fighting the good fight in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Illinois, the land of Lincoln, a state that's beloved by Americans. They look at Chicago every week at the chaos. Walk us through, what are you doing? What is Darren Bailey going to do about this and running for the Republican nomination?
Well, Darren Bailey's been doing something about this for the last 3 years. I got ticked off at tax increases, so I primaried my state representative when he was supporting a just all-out 32% tax increase. So I won the House seat in 2019 and 2020. And then I ran for Senate when my senator stepped down again and was encouraged to take his place. So I've been pushing back against all of this nonsense. And as a matter of fact, when the lockdowns hit Illinois and our governor took some tyrannical actions by self-imposing lockdowns of schools and churches and businesses, I stood up and I sued him in May of 2020, and I won that lawsuit. So we've been standing up, pushing back, trying to get the people back involved in this constitutional republic. People have a right to take their schools back. It's already there. They've just become complacent. So we've been trying to lift up that message of getting people involved, getting them involved. You know, President Trump said there was going to be voter fraud 2 years ago. And guess what? We had voter fraud. But our Republican parties, statewide and national, they didn't do anything about it. They didn't tell us that we needed to have people serving as election judges and poll watchers. And that's what we're doing here in Illinois. We've got a grassroots movement that is amazing. And as a matter of fact, 2 nights ago, I was blessed to be
hang on. Let me talk to that grassroots. You got one of the biggest hedge fund guys in the world. Put $40 million in back of a guy who's not even a MAGA. $40 million in a primary. Is that true?
Yes. Well, no, it's not actually $45 million.
And you have a grassroots effort that's going to beat that.
Right. Yes. Oh, yes.
You're going to beat $45 million that's targeted you because they want basically a liberal Democrat to win the primary. How are you going to do that?
That is exactly right. Yeah, we're beating it now. We're winning, and that's why this money has continued. There's been $20 million already spent in lies and attacks against us, and because we've already laid out the groundwork and we've been traveling the state of Illinois, people know who I am, and they're not buying these lies. So it's the people who have been forgotten and left out from government. They're the ones that's going to step up. We're going to do something amazing here in Illinois. Number one, on June 28th, when we beat $45 million plus. And when we oust and fire J.B. Pritzker in November 28th, or November 8th, I have no doubt about that.
Okay, tell me what you're going to do. Pritzker is one of these guys. Hang on. He wants to run for president. Give me 2 minutes because we've got to bounce. 2 minutes. What are you going to do on the city of Chicago? It's one of America, right after New York. It's the greatest city. It is another city in anarchy and chaos. What are you going to do as governor?
Well, we've got to call it what it is. First, day one, we've got to sit down and try to have a conversation with the elected leaders. And if that doesn't happen, that's the one reason why we're going to get Pritzker out of office, because I've got a heavy presence in the city of Chicago. And the churches on the south side and on the west side, they're tired of what's going on. They don't like it. They've just never heard a conservative message that's been consistent. And then once elected, has consistently stood on their word and pushed back. So, yeah, Chicago is a city of chaos. You may or may not have heard a couple nights ago in a debate, I called it a corrupt, crime-ridden, dysfunctional hellhole, and it raised a lot of questions. But you want to know what happened about 6 hours after I said that? A homeless man who everyone knew as the walking man in the loop, he was doused with gasoline and set on fire. Now, what does that sound like to you? We've got to call things what they are, like President Trump is so good at, and then we have got to get to work to solve the problem. And if what happens in Chicago in 10% of the state affects the rest of the state, and the people of Illinois are tired of it. And when we've got to restore honor, integrity to such a great city, and we do that, as Andrew was speaking earlier, by unhandcuffing the police so they can do their job.
Darren, how do people find about you, about social media? How they find out about you on your website? You got a huge supporter in Steve Cortez that carries a lot of weight with this audience. We want to find out more about you. How do we do that?
BaileyForIllinois.com is our webpage, and then check us out on my Facebook, Darren Bailey for Governor. We've got a very active following. I've got a very active page there. So, and we've
Darren,
got an
thank
active
you. I look forward to having you back here.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Want to make sure you go to all. Darren Bailey in Illinois, Doug Mastriano in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Andrew Giuliani in the state of New York. I tell you, if you get these guys in office, you're going to turn this thing around. And I'm telling you, Philadelphia, New York City, and Chicago deserve governors like that. Let's go out to Arizona and Eli Crane. Eli, thank you for changing your schedule around today. I'm a little jammed for time, but I got to ask you, you're a special forces guy, Navy SEAL. You're a guy that's a shooter. Please tell me on your when you're in Congress, what are we going to do about this nightmare around these schools? I mean, I don't even want to get into what happened out there in Texas with the law enforcement, but we got problems with these young kids that have mental problems. The parents just kick it down the road. It's affecting everything. Tell me what you're going to do when you're in Congress about this, sir.
Well, Steve, this one starts with education. First, obviously, there's the issue of having too many A+ schools with D- security systems. And then also, Steve, one of the most shocking things when you start looking into this issue is that between 75 and 90% of these young men that are going into schools and butchering these young kids I hope you're ready for this. They're fatherless, Steve. There's a bunch of research out there that shows this. Nobody ever talks about it because there's been a war on masculinity. There's been a war on the nuclear family. But this is the one that sticks out to me the most, and nobody ever talks about it. 75 to 90%, depend on what study you're looking at, of these kids that are doing this are fatherless. That is a massive problem, Steve, and people have to understand masculinity is a lot like a pit bull. How that dog comes out, the term is dependent a lot upon how it's treated. If is it loved? Is it nurtured? Is it protected? Or is it beaten and ignored? And so I want people to understand that. And then here's the other thing, Steve, when you start looking at soft targets in these schools, I've done a lot of research on this. I've spoken on it. I've written about it. I'm happy to send in, a list that I've made. But here's the thing that parents can do, because I actually did this myself. I found out that my kids had no security at their school. I set an appointment with the principal. I went in and I told him, sir, I love what you're doing here with the academics, but I got to be honest with you, this school is an extremely soft target, and I'm glad that my kids are one grade ahead in everything that they're learning. But if you're not willing to keep them safe, it really doesn't matter. So parents, you guys can get after the administrators and the leaders in your school, just like you have with CRT. I know this is an activist audience, and some of the things that you can look for are is there a plan for an active shooter? Is there an armed guard or a resource officer? Is there a solid perimeter with walls and fence around the school? Are there any trauma bags or life-saving gear on campus? Does the staff have any trauma or life-saving medical training? Do interested have metal detectors or security controls, monitored camera systems? And I can keep going down the list, but these are the types of things you need to be looking for.
I tell you what I want to do. Eli, here's what I want to do. I want to get you set up with either the Hill, Real Clear Policy. I want to get the list. I want to bring you back on Tuesday, day after the holiday. I want to drill down on this because you've thought this through. There's nothing could be. You're absolutely correct in the masculinity we've been talking about, but I want to go. You're an operator. You've been a shooter, right? You're defending your country. I want to get the list and go through it with you because this is critical, not just in Arizona, but the whole nation. Eli, how do people get to your campaign? How do they find out more about you personally, your service to your country and your campaign?
Thank you, Steve. It's EliForArizona.com. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you. We appreciate what you're doing at the War Room too, Steve.
I got to tell you, Eli, the audience really loves you, and we want to get back here and get on top of this thing. This thing out in Texas, it can't go on. It's got to be stopped, and we're going to have to stop it. The whole thing with the kids, and then the whole thing with the schools. So thank you very much. I know it's a big weekend for you, Memorial Day weekend. So fight on.
Thank you, Steve.
Really proud the other day. Let's get Joanna. We're going to get Joanna Miller up. Joanna Miller came on the show the other day, and we talked afterwards about the fiasco with Biden. She wrote a great analytical piece. She was the right-hand man of Dr. Peter Navarro in the White House. She works for President Trump now. She got it over to John Tamney, the guys at Real Clear Markets. I think it's their number one trafficked story today. Tell us what you did about this Biden disaster on formula. I mean, they're not protecting the kids in school, and now they're starving the babies when they're actually born. Joanna Miller.
100%. So here's just several issues that I wrote about in the op-ed. So firstly, compared to how we respond to supply chain crisis in the Trump admin, which is in Trump time as fast as possible, compared to the Biden administration, it took us, Peter Navarro, President Trump, and our team 17 days to stand up a brand new ventilator factory, all USA made, when we had a ventilator shortage, and that took us 17 days. It took Biden 217 days from when shortages of baby formula were first reported to even invoke the Defense Production Act. And by the way, they still haven't awarded a single contract under the DPA for mass production of baby formula. Secondly, several members of Congress are proposing bills supposedly aimed at fixing this crisis. For example, purple-haired nutcase Rosa DeLauro is proposing a $30 million bill, and basically that bill does mostly just stuff the pockets of FDA bureaucrats, making them richer. And then you have on the right, free market fanatic Rand Paul, who wants to make it easier to import baby formula from Europe that's potentially contaminated and has all these problems. And basically sacrificing American jobs at the altar of free trade and free markets. And by the way, these are the same European countries that want our soldiers to fight their foreign wars and also subsidize their industry at the expense of our American jobs. And the last thing I want to talk about is how the Democrats and the leftist media constantly attack us for not using the Defense Production Act to respond to supply chain crises during the pandemic that we handled in the Trump administration. However, we had used it over 100 times, and it takes Biden sleepwalking for 6 months to even invoke it when our 3 million babies in this country, their lives are on the line because of this shortage.
Okay, the article is up in Real Clear Markets, which is one of the top sites out there, particularly for everything in finance and economics. And I think it's the number one draw today. We're going to push it out everywhere. Joanna, I know you're going to be on top of this. We got a lot of other things to talk to you. How do people find you on social media? Do you have a website, Substack? What do you got?
So Truth Social, Joanna Miller, no spaces. Instagram, Joanna Miller 1026, and my Twitter is USA_Joanna.
We had Andrew Giuliani worked in the White House. Joanna Miller was the wingman for Dr. Peter Navarro. She worked for President Trump. She went to the private sector, and now she's back working with President Trump. He made a great pick, Joanna. Thank you for doing this, and thank you for writing that article.
Thank you for having me on.
Joanna Miller, the wingman for Dr. Peter Navarro. You're going to hear a lot of that from that young woman. Boris, real quickly, how do you get? By the way, very dramatic. I want everybody. We're going to put the whole speech of President Trump up on our Getter site. How do people get to you, Boris, over the weekend?
Steve, what an amazing speech by the president. So honored to work for him and support him and champion him. BorisCP.com is the website. At BorisCP on Getter, at BorisCP on Twitter, at Boris on Truth Social, Boris_Epshteyn on Instagram. Stay strong. God bless and Shabbat Shalom.
By the way, everybody out there, Memorial Day weekend, we have a special tomorrow morning, The Coming War with Taiwan. On Monday morning, we have our annual Memorial Day special with Patrick K. O'Donnell and Captain Bannon. But here's what I want to leave you with till tomorrow morning. You look at Joanna Miller, Andrew Giuliani, Darren running for the governorship in Illinois, Eli Crane. You look at these people. You look Darren Bailey. That is a winning ticket right there. We're on the rise. We're ascendant. See you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m.